let's move on to our main agenda for tonight. Our topic for this interfaith dialogue is creation versus evolution, and our speakers will be discussing their opinions about this topic that will be conducted by our moderator, Dr. Fairuz Azmi, the president of KYUEM Muscom from batch 4, 2002. Without further ado, I will hand over this program to Dr. Fairuz, and he'll be introducing our speakers for tonight. I invite all the speakers and the moderator to sit here.
Assalamualaikum wabarakatuh, and a very good evening to all. I think first of all, because I was in Ireland for almost 9 years, one of those things that we learned is when you attend a program, you should fill in the front seats first. I think that's the thing that we should change, and I would like to request all the attendees, if you could sit in front and move in front and be more attentive. Change our culture to be a better Malaysians. You will see the difference when you change this. You will see how you're more attentive, and you'll be surprised how you will get more than by sitting at the back. So we have 3 speakers for tonight. One is on my right is Brother Shah Kirit. He's a well-known in comparative religion speakers. And has been giving courses in comparative religion for 10 years. He is also a Da'wah ambassador at the Sabah Islamic Media. I think it's a well-known company for Da'wah purposes, which he joined in 1999. And next to me, on my left, is Mr. Willie Poh. He's a devoted Christian follower and has served overseas Christian fellowship on campus and worshipped, served and received training in good churches. Currently he is pursuing his study at Malaysia Baptist Theological Seminary, MBTS in Penang. And our last speaker is Mr. Willie Poh. He's a lecturer in statistics at the Center for Foundation Studies and Extension Education at Multimedia University. In August 25th last year, 2012, there was a debate between atheists and Christians in Malaysia on the existence of God, and he was the rep for the atheist group. So we have 3 amazing speakers. I have a big responsibility on me not to be biased for the 3 speakers, obviously, and I will do my best, inshallah. We will divide tonight's event into 2. The first one is I will give each speakers to speak on the topic for tonight, which is creation versus evolution, for 20 minutes each. And then when we finish the first round, sorry, the first part of the program, we will give the audience time to ask questions. Okay, and that's it. As simple as that. Okay, so it is extremely important that you guys give a lot of attention. And I know by the time you arrive in this hall, you already have some question in mind. It might or it might not be answered during the presentation. If not, please ask questions, and obviously they will do their best to answer. And mind our languages, mind our, budi bicara, our ethics as Malaysians, as Muslims, as Christians, as Buddhists, as the Eastern people. I hope there's no emotions or over emotions during our talk. We be professionals, okay? Inshallah. So for For our first round, okay, we will give the first round to talk. The first speaker who's going to speak first is Mr. Willie Poh. Okay, I'm welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I decided not to wear a blazer tonight because I thought it was going to be a bit warm, but it turns out to be a bit cold, so put it back on. So we're here to talk about creation versus evolution. I'm from the atheist side, so obviously most of what I'm going to talk about is on the evolution side. Since I don't believe in the existence of a God, I obviously don't believe in creation. Right, so that's myself. Actually, I'm more in the area of computer applications. Right? There's the brochure mentioned there, statistics is one of the subjects I teach, but my main area is actually IT. So I'm an atheist. So this term sounds very bombastic, but it simply means a person who does not believe in the existence of God. Right? So there are quite a number of terms associated with our community. Some of us refer to ourselves as free thinkers, some agnostic, etc. It's a very diverse community. You will probably have meet lecturers, doctors, bus drivers, etc., who don't actually believe in the existence of God. Right? So, but we're not very obvious in Malaysia, obviously, for the main reason that we are not very. Well, it is the general assumption of the Malaysian public that most people believe in the existence of God. So those of us who don't believe usually we're just like, you know, oh, maybe he's just lazy to think about it or something like that. So, but like people like myself have thought about this a lot. I didn't arrive to atheism due to just being too lazy to think about whether God really exists or not. I came from a Christian background. I have read a translation of the Al-Quran. I'm actually aware that you're not supposed to say you have read the Al-Quran unless you've read it in the original language, for example. Right, so these kind of things, I was searching for the truth for a very, very long time, and this is where I ended up. Right, so, and do bear in mind that atheism, most people in atheism do not actually say that God does not exist. We're not here, we don't believe that you cannot possibly say that God exists or not. We just don't believe in God's existence simply due to insufficient evidence of His existence. Right, so that's it, atheism. So evolution, naturally, evolution and atheism goes hand in hand quite well, but I would very strongly point out that evolution has nothing to do with atheism. Right? Evolution is a scientific theory, and I'm sure all of you here study science, physics, biology, and so on. And evolution is just a scientific theory, and it is a theory which is accepted by a significant portion of the scientific community amongst the biologists and so on. So, of course, there's a lot of debate on whether it is true or not, right? But if you come from a very, very scientific background, most of the time, you don't have much of a problem with the actual details of evolution itself. Now, a lot of people confuse evolution with the actual origin of life, for example. Evolution does not offer a theory for where life started. Evolution offers a theory of how life came to be as diverse as it is. How you have the diversity of species and all the different creatures that is in existence today. It doesn't actually tell you how actually life started. That's called abiogenesis, right? For example, if you're from the perspective that life started from nothing, that's actually a completely different topic. So a lot of people, when asking about evolution, they kind of mix up the two. So if you were to say that evolution doesn't actually tell you how life started, yeah, it's true. Evolution doesn't say anything about that. Evolution simply thinks that there is probably a cell somewhere, right, in the beginning, where things will move forward. But we're pushing the boundaries, right? As we go along, we're trying to identify where exactly is the border between non-life and life, how the different materials and chemicals may be able to form up into things that look like cells, and how that evolves from that point on. So science is obviously a field which constantly grows and improves on the knowledge that it actually has. So we move gradually from one point to another. Okay, I'm taking a little bit too much time. So, the colors are a bit strange. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about how this thing came about. Now, in the very early stages, people thought about life as fixed forms, right? So this is a picture of different faces of humans. So we think about different types of dogs, we talk about different types of cats, birds, and etc. And very, very early on, the early philosophers, the dominant philosophy, Aristotle, Plato, and all these people thought that there is a divine order, that there's a correct way for things to exist, and everything came in packages. So bird is one type of package. And the word species is actually created by Aristotle. In Latin, it simply means type or forms or kinds. Right? So, and in the early stages, biology was mostly interested in identifying, this is a cat. Is this a different cat or is it the same cat? So it's mainly an issue of that, studying behavior, studying biological characteristics, cutting them open, checking out their bones and all these kind of things. Eventually, okay, there's a little bit problem with the fonts and stuff. Eventually, we started looking at, and these are obvious clues, right, in the environment. You notice that there's adaptation, and this is actually one of Charles Darwin's original things that he noticed, his finches, right, on some of the islands that he visited, and he noticed that different types of birds that eat different types of things actually form different types of beaks. So adaptation, although it is very obvious throughout all of most of biological research, but in the early stages, most of the explanations came from transmutation, which is, you know, a strange way of saying, like, if you work out a lot and you become very muscular, your children will be born very muscular, and that does not make sense. And because you cannot prove it, right? It doesn't make sense if you work out like and you're so buff when your children comes out, you don't have a buff little babies, you know, or skinny little babies because you starve yourself right before you give birth or something like that. So it doesn't work, right? So eventually there are three major facts. One is that usually there are more offspring produced than can survive, right? Especially in the animal kingdom. Humanity, thankfully, have solved this problem somewhat. The fact that we can inherit traits, or that individuals have different traits, first of all. We are all slightly from each other, and certain things will allow us to survive a little bit better, right? So if you think about it, if you're more good-looking, of course this is not a very nice thing to say, but if you're good-looking, the chances of you of getting married and having children is higher, so your gene will survive. Or if you're very hardworking, or if you demonstrate to a lady that you're very good at it. I don't know whether you can say that people are born lazy. I don't think anybody claims that, but you are born with specific traits, right, which will lead to your chances of reproduction. So this, and of course, the last thing is your ability to inherit traits, right? So these three things, differing traits, your ability to inherit traits, and the ability of us to produce more offspring than usually survive, of course, leads us to modern evolution as we know it today. So modern evolution is powered by two main things. Choosing out of many different available selections, and how the different selections came about in the first place. So you have natural selection and mutation. So the reason why Darwin is usually recognized as the founder of evolution, or the person who discovered it, is because he actually framed it in terms of natural selection. Mutation came very much later, once we understood genes and all this kind of things better. But from observation, they knew that it is possible to get different types of results from reproduction. Right? So natural selection is basically the idea that you can, without any outside or external influence, eventually arrive at creatures which are capable of adapting to this, of specific environments, because they are better suited to survive in that environment. Right? So this picture is actually a picture of two moths, two butterflies. Actually, moths and butterflies are different. So the left one is black, the right one is white. Right? And this is a classic textbook example. If you have read some controversy about this controversy has been resolved, right, recently. The black moth, the white moth is the popular moth that existed in UK, right, before the Industrial Revolution. But thanks to the Industrial Revolution, a lot of the trees turned very blackish in color, and during that time, the white moth population dropped and the black moth population rose, because most of the trees in the area were black. So the chances of a predator, or the chances of things killing black moths, were lower when they were living in a mostly very dark colored environment. Right? So, and recently, due to higher industrial standards, environmental standards in UK, the white moth has come back because the trees have turned back into white color again. So this is actually one of the classical examples of how natural selection works. Right? In this case, the environment was affected by human behavior, but in every environment, the same rule applies. If you're well fitted to survive in an environment, you are not chosen by anybody. Right? The word selection here is a little bit strange. Nobody chooses you. Right? That's why it's called natural selection. By your very nature, because of the specific traits that you have, you're more likely to survive. And when you survive, you pass on those nice things to your children. Right? So that's basically it. And after a couple of generations, today we know that we know about the DNA. We discovered it not too long ago, and we understand how mutations in the genes work. There's actually more than one factor: genetic drift and all kinds of things which can cause changes in population as well. But mutation is one of the major factors, right? So when your genes change, if you get a trait which is positive, they get selected by natural selection, right? So this is how you create a lot of variety. And one of the very important things to understand about evolution is that it happens over millions and millions of years. You don't get evolution overnight. It's not something that you can sit and you throw a fish in a bowl and you stare at it for a very long time and you expect to see evolution. If you are somehow able to find a fish that reproduces quickly enough so that you can see the changes in the children, then you can probably observe processes of evolution. And this experiment has actually been done with guppies. You know, those very colorful, I think it's fighting fish, but it's the very, very colorful fish things. Right? We've done experiments with those. We've done experiments with a type of fish in some of the lakes as well. And the changes are somehow so incredible that they go beyond the expectations of biologists. But they were left there for about 3 months. Right? So that's around a time frame where you can see minor changes in mouth structure of a fish, for example. Right? But for a fish to turn into, this is one of the major things which is usually brought up against evolution. A cat can't turn into a dog kind of thing. But of course, you can't expect these kind of things to change in the short term. So what do we actually know about evolution? Right? What kind of evidence we have? Now, usually people go to the fossils and all these kind of things. The best evidence you have for evolution today is no longer fossils, it's no longer all this other anecdotal evidence, it's genetics. Genetics is actually the best way you know whether evolution happened or not. Because we can now look at the DNA of all the creatures. We have sequenced human DNA, we've sequenced a lot of animal DNAs as well. I think we even have Tyrannosaurus Rex DNA, if I'm not mistaken. Right? So all these kind of, or parts of it. And by analyzing the DNA sequence, you can actually tell how related creatures are to each other. Like from us versus a chimpanzee, we're about 99% similar. There's only about 1 to, depending on how you look at it mathematically, right? 1 to 5% difference between us and chimpanzees. So you can actually also identify where within your genetic structure the evolution or the major changes happened, right? Which is the part where we actually branched out. And the other, of course, very common misconception is that we evolved from monkeys, right? We didn't evolve from monkeys. We and the monkeys had a common ancestor, right? So there was a creature in the past. One branch of them became chimpanzees. The other branch became humans. So that is what evolution tells us. And of course, this field is a little bit harder for laymen, even for myself, to be able to actually see this evidence for ourselves. But this research is actually giving us a lot of information about how the entire animal kingdom split, right, from one type of creature to another. So if you work in the field of genetics and if you work with genes and all these kind of things, this is actually the most powerful indication or the most powerful evidence which we have today of evolution happening. This is sort of like the entire textbook, right, from which you can trace the lines of how actually evolution happened and all these things. So from more obvious examples, things that we can usually see and observe is of course comparative anatomy, right? This is the structure of a hand or an arm, right? So I don't know how to pronounce that, Euthenotron, is actually the very earliest fish which turned into a land-dwelling animal. We think that this is the major ancestor of many of the land animals we have today. And if you look at the body structure of an amphibian, a mammal, a reptile, and even a bird, you see that the same bones which it originally had is similarly existent in all the other creatures as well. So they have just changed or adapted to fit different environments. So sometimes when they said like, I can't turn into a dog, but if you open up the insides, they are actually more or less the same things, right? The cells are very similar. Although a lot of details, of course you can't do the same things with the two types of creatures, but a lot of the details internally are replicated, are copied. So when evolution comes up with something and it works, it is used many, many times. And remember, every single time I say it uses, evolution is not alive and it doesn't think, right? It just so happens that a useful tool is selected for, right, in successive generations. So the more traditional example is the fossil record. So this is an example of horse evolution from the bottom up. That's the modern horse, right? You cannot see the middle picture very well, but that's what the leg looks like, the leg structure looks like. In the beginning, it still have 4 toes like that. So eventually, the bones shrunk over the different generations, and eventually became just a single stick, which is the horse leg which we have today. And we have fossil records of this creature, including the structure of the teeth as well, on the right side there. But what is most interesting about this is actually the stuff on the left side, right? And this is, it's not about finding fossils and just looking at the shapes of the skeletons. It's also about finding fossils at the correct timeline, right? So you see at the bottom there, that is the earliest, the oldest dated rock, right? And you find the earliest generation of these creatures. So over years, now the surface of the earth is up here, right? But over the generations, it gets covered by the next generation of minerals and whatnot. So if you have any skeletons buried down there, you're going to have, and if it gets preserved, which is not very often, you get sometimes a good skeletal structure of a creature, right? And you can date the carbon or other elements inside the rock. Carbon dating is not the only method we use to date minerals today. So you can actually tell how old is the rock which you dig the fossil out of. So, and throughout the entire history of paleontology, we have never found a bone structure which is out of place. We have never found a bone structure which is out of place with its timeline. Right, so if you would expect, you cannot find a modern horse in a very, very old rock, for example. We don't find human bones next to a T-Rex. So it has never happened in the entire history of paleontology. So it's very consistent in terms of what we have found, and that consistency is actually what shows us very, very early on that evolution is probably very, very accurate in describing what's going on. Now, some people say that evolution is a tautology. You cannot prove that it is wrong. You can actually. All you have to do is to find a human being riding that horse, for example, his bone right next to it, an exact human skeleton. And if you date the skeleton, you find that the minerals is actually the same age as the horse, the old, early version of the horse. Then you will know that there's something wrong here, right? So, of course, you put it through very rigorous testing, but if you can prove conclusively that it's not a hoax, and many of these hoaxes have existed, of course, you can actually figure out whether there are new questions that you need to answer in evolution, right? And you can possibly throw the entire evolutionary theory out of the picture. So, and the other thing is geographical distribution. So this is actually not a good picture example of this evidence, but if you look at the distribution of animals in the world, you don't find the same animals living in the same places, the same types of places on Earth. Right, this is a nice jungle. You don't find the same animal living in this nice jungle and that similar jungle. What you find is creatures, you can explain how creatures move across the world and how they evolve for a very long time. For example, marsupials, kangaroos, and all these kind of creatures, you can find them in, you can find this species of creature in South America, you can find them in Australia, but you can't find them in the northern hemispheres. So people guess that they must have originated in South America and then moved to Australia, but then you would ask, how did they cross the ocean? But long time ago, it's actually one piece of land, right? So if you studied geology, the Earth used to be one big giant landmass, and Antarctica was actually connecting the 2 land masses. So they said, based on this prediction, you must be able to find fossils in Antarctica. And sure enough, a couple of years back, not just a couple, I think, a group of fossil hunters actually found the first animal fossils in Antarctica, and they were marsupials. They were the same type of species as kangaroos, the early ancestors. Right, so this is a pretty good. This one actually shows the ring species. You can start with one species in one site, right? And if they go into different environments, they evolve different colors. And at one point, when they meet back up, 2 species meet again, they fail to interbreed. Right, so this is one of the types of evolution you can observe today, right? And usually evolution happens over time. This is an example of evolution that happens over distances, right? So. And of course, the last easiest example, and any medic student here would know, would be bacterial evolution. Right? Bacteria can. This is the reason why you have to finish your antibiotics, as far as I understand it. Right? You have to finish it because when you kill germs in your body, you're actually killing off the weakest germs first. So if you eat 1 dose of antibiotics, the strong germs are still left in you, and you're actually helping them grow by killing off all their competition. Right? So if you don't finish a dose, the stronger bacteria will need a couple more doses to kill. So if you stop taking it, you're actually helping the weaker bacteria to survive better in your body. Right? So this is observable evolution, which you see. So this is the last part, which is what exactly are its implications. It has nothing to do with my atheism. Of course, the major problems which we get with evolution from a position of faith usually is the question of, now what happens to humans, right? Do animals have souls? If animals don't have souls, then and you accept that evolution actually happened, then when did the first early ancestor of humanity actually gets a soul? Where's the dividing line that you actually decide that this thing gets a soul and the rest are not humans? If things were created, why go through this very elaborate process, which is very full of suffering? Tons of things have to die in order for it to evolve very, very slowly over millions and millions of years in order for to create the final thing which you want to create, when you can probably do that, right? So so these are all problems which usually religion have with evolution, which luckily atheism doesn't, I guess, in that sense. Although evolution doesn't inform my atheism, it doesn't actually move me towards atheism. I came to atheism by studying scripture and all these kind of things. But evolution does fit very well with, in terms of atheism, which is one of the reasons why you find that there's a lot of biologists who are actually atheists. But having said that, there are also many Muslim biologists, evolutionary biologists, as well as Christian evolutionary biologists who have completely no problems and have resolved the issues. So it's actually a huge spectrum of beliefs, right? Depending on how literally you read your Holy Scripture and all that. So yeah, so that's it, right? So evolution basically mostly a scientific theory. Now, for those of us on the atheist side, we don't take when you don't come from a position of a particular belief and you just observe the world as it is, then what all evolution is trying to do is based on the existing evidence, based on what we understand and what we've seen. All evolution is trying to do is to give an explanation of how things can happen this way, right? So the reason why it is natural selection in evolution, and this doesn't involve somebody else outside meddling with things, is because this is an explanation that works. This is an explanation that works without having to explain anything. For example, how your phone works, right? That's physics and that's electromagnetics and all those kind of things. But if you have to explain how the phone works by saying that every time I turn it on, some power have to change it so that it works, then that's not science anymore. So that's the very simple reason why evolution is natural and not anything else. Right? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Willie Poh. That was very interesting. So our next speaker will be Mr. Oliver Wong, which is he'll the raps for our Christians. Let's wait a few minutes before his setting up his laptop.
Thank you for coming tonight. I'm not sure whether you caught a glance of my wallpaper just now. Yeah. Any idea what that is? Yeah? Sorry, that's besides being interested in Christianity, I'm also a fan of Transformers. But that has nothing to do with creation and evolution, I think. So let's get to this evening's topic. I would like to phrase it as creation and evolution instead of versus, because versus sounds like you're playing Street Fighter. What do we really learn in our classrooms or lecture halls? I would like to have some audience participation. I mean, I'll just ask you, okay, how many of you actually have learned about evolution in your class? Whether it's secondary school or university? Yes. How many of you have been taught creation in your class? Wow. What class is that? Agama. Okay. Not science, right? Now, creation or evolution. Before we start, let me tell you a short story. A little girl asked her mother, how did the human race appear? Can you hear me? You can hear me, right? Okay. A little girl asked, how did the human race appear? The mother answered, God made Adam and Eve, and they had children, and so was all mankind made. 2 days later, the same little girl asked her daddy, the same question. the daddy answered, "Many years ago, there were monkeys from which the human race evolved." I'm sure just now, he clarified that it's not exactly monkey per se, but some kind of creature that related to it. So the confused little girl returned to her mother and said, "Mom, how is it possible that you told me the human race was created by God, and Daddy said they developed from monkeys?" The mother answered, you know what did the mother say? "Well, dear, it is very simple. I told you about my side of the family, and your father told you about his." Okay, so I think I won't go to evolution because we have an excellent presentation just now. So we go straight to creation. Now, what is creation? Creation, generally and originally, creation asserts that humans, as well as the rest of the natural world, that means the whole universe, they were created by God. Okay, so it's according to what Genesis said. In 6 days, everything was created. So day 1, light. The number is the chapter and verse in the book of Genesis. Day 2, water and sky. Day 3, land and vegetation. Day 4, luminaries, means sun, moon, and the stars. All the stars, countless stars. Day 5, fish and birds. Day 6, beasts and man. Now, you see there's actually some kind of correspondence here, if you have noticed. You see, day 1, day 4, okay, light came first before sun and moon. Strange, right? Day 2, water, sky. Day 5, fish, birds. Day 3, land, vegetation. Day 6, beast, man. So it's some kind of relationship here. So I think God purposely put a certain kind of creativity into the Bible, how he inspired Christian authors to write. And it's very interesting to note that. I said originally creation asserts six-day creation because that was the view all the way from the time of Jesus until later on, until maybe 18th century. Yeah, that's the major view. But since then it has been challenged by the theory of evolution. And so the millions and millions of years of creation crept into Christianity. So a lot of Christians actually believe in millions and millions of years as well. Now the book of Genesis is actually the, can you find Genesis? It's the first book in the many books of the Bible, okay? It's under the book of law, but it talks about creation in the first 2 chapters. So these are all the books in the Bible, and Genesis is the first book. Before we go further, let's see some statistics from 3 very advanced Western countries. Created within 10,000 years is referring to belief in creation by God. That means the earth and everything is less than 10,000 years old. So it's around 6,000 to 10,000 years old. So you might be surprised to find that actually most Americans hold on to a biblical view of creation. While Canada and Great Britain, most of them believe in evolution. Millions of years. Now within creationism, that means talking about creation, there is this huge spectrum. I'll show you a list, okay? There are different types of creationism, okay? The first one is called young earth creation. That means you believe that the earth is young. Young means less than 10,000 years old, okay? And then after that there's old earth, day-age creation, followed by gap theory, progressive creation, theistic evolution, and evolutionary creation. Okay, the further south you go, the more similar it is to evolution in the understanding and interpretation of how you explain this creationism. The more north you go, the more different it is from evolution. So let's start from the bottom, okay? Let's start from the bottom. I'll explain each just very quickly. Now, types of creationism. The first one is evolutionary creation. this view of all earth creationism is very similar to the next one, okay? They believe that evolution happened and God is actually the one that is guiding evolution. So they believe in the theory of evolution, what Darwin taught. So everything that is in the theory of evolution, this group of Christians who believe in evolutionary creation, they will embrace it. No problem with millions and millions of years. No problem with natural selection and animals crossing macroevolution and all those things. Okay, so no problem with that. Next one is theistic evolution. This is probably the most accepted view of all Earth creation. Actually, besides the young Earth, all the rest are all Earth. Okay, but the bottom two are a bit too much towards evolution. So that's why I didn't put all Earth. But it's some kind of all Earth creation. They all believe that the Earth is old, as in millions, billions of years, maybe 4 billion years. Yeah. So they believe that God used the tool of evolution to develop life. Okay. Some of them believe that God actually started life and then just let go and sit there and watch. But some believe that God actually has continual interference in human beings' life. So this is theistic evolution. It means evolution with theism, with understanding of God. The next one is getting more interesting. Okay, the first two are more similar, but this one is a bit different. All Earth progressive creation. Believers who uphold this, please know that all these are, there are Christians who believe in all these, okay? The Christians who believe in this one, they believe that God was intimately involved in the development of life on Earth. Okay, He intervened throughout the billions of years to create species as old one become extinct. So as one become extinct, God create new species. So it goes on and on. Do you know what I mean? So when animals die off, extinct, God create new one. That's how new animals come in again and again through God's creation, through millions, billions of years. The next one, this is a very interesting one. It's called gap theory creation. Let's look at this part, okay? The blue color shows the first verse and the second verse of the book of Genesis in the Bible. In verse 1, the Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. But in verse 2, it says that the earth was without form and void. So the question arises, how can something that God has created be without form and be empty, void? Does God create something that is bad, lousy, void, formless? So that's why this understanding of creationism, they propose that there is actually a literal gap of millions, maybe even billions of years between verse 1 and verse 2 of the book of Genesis. That means many, many things happened between these two verses. They believe that God created a pre-earth with dinosaurs, all the animals from the fossil record. But something happened. Usually they will say it's related to Satan. Satan's fall from heaven, destroying the earth. And following that, in verse 2, it refers to a new earth. God recreated the earth and put Adam and Eve there. So when you see fossil records of millions of years on earth, actually it came from the gap of millions of years. So those who believe in the gap theory creation, they have a very convenient way of sweeping all the millions of years in between the two verses. Now, next one, day-age creation. Okay, first of all, they believe in a literal pair of Adam and Eve. That means God actually created Adam and Eve in the beginning. Okay, there's no gap. Verse 1, verse 2 is continuous. There's no gap in between. But they don't believe that every day that God created something, those are actual 24 hours day. That's why it's called day age. So one day represents an age, an era, okay, an amount of time. It can be from anything, millions to billions of years. That's day age. So I have a picture here, how day age creationists who believe in God, who love Jesus Christ, who goes to church, but they believe in this, okay? They have day 1. they can correspond to billions of years. So they say the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. So day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. And it corresponds to the 4.5 billion years of Earth's history, age. The last one. This one differs from evolutionism the most, the greatest difference. Okay, young Earth creationists believe that the Earth and everything else were created in 24-hour periods of 6 days. And on the 7th day, God rested. Okay, so day 1 to day 6. Earlier I showed you the picture, remember? So there are different things created on different days. They also believe in a worldwide flood called Noah's flood in the book of Genesis, where the flood actually destroyed all the animals. All land animals were killed, they perished, and they were buried in the flood sediments. That's why young Earth creationists, they believe that all the fossils actually came from the worldwide flood event, which God sent to destroy the wicked people, and the flood actually destroyed everything. So, back to six ways of looking at creationism. You guess which camp, so-called camp, do I belong to? I must choose one, right? I cannot say that I'm in everything. Anyone? Sorry? Young? Because I look young, right? No? It's correct, okay? I believe in young Earth creation. This means that I believe that the universe and the Earth and everything in it is young. It is less than 10,000 years old. Some people might stretch it a bit, 12,000, but it's around there. Okay, 10,000, some say 6,000. So there's the number of years. So everything on Earth are young. How we explain millions and millions of years, there are, of course, ways to explain it. But before that, we see this. Okay, this is something that is important for us to know, okay? It is important to recognize that when we come to see our natural surrounding, the Earth, or any evidence, fossils, or anything in the Earth, okay, our presupposition influence the way we interpret the evidence. This means if you wear glasses, a pair of glasses, what you see is determined by the shades of your glasses, so to say. Okay, so if I'm wearing a blue-colored glasses, with blue-colored glass, then the things that I see are tinged in blue. If you're wearing red, you see red things. Okay, so both evolutionists and creationists and Muslim creationists, we all see things covered by our presuppositions. So we actually are working on the same evidence. All of us are from Earth, I think. So we are on the same evidence, working towards understanding how we come about. I think the answer is not clear in evolution, because in evolution people cannot say purpose of life. What is the purpose of life? Is it just to, to become better, to become the best, so the weak will die and the strong will live? But for creation, we know that God has created us with a purpose. Now, this is another example. A Christian will say great evidence for creation, but evolutionists will say great evidence for evolution. Same evidence. Now, these two compatible, actually from a young Earth creationist perspective, evolution and creation have too many differences to be reconcilable. But for all Earth creationists, they have reconciled some of the things. But this is from a young Earth creationist point of view. You can just see there are different things that are so different. I understand that there's a very long there's a very long Q&A session later. right? So, I don't know whether it's right to do so, but I've prepared a list of FAQ, of questions, which might stir your imagination or help you to ask questions. These questions are what I have prepared, okay? So if you have a phone, I would suggest that you take a picture of it, so they can refer to it later. And you can just call out the number when we are in the Q&A session. Those that are bold are actually, I think, they are the more interesting questions that people would like to know. Like, what about the dinosaurs? You know, those kind of questions. So the rest that are not bolded are also interesting, I hope. Yeah, and finally, just let me wrap up with this analogy. I'll just read, since the whole thing is there. God is the software designer. Information does not create itself. He created a perfect code, which is the world. He released it to beta tester, the first two human beings, Adam and Eve. They infected the code with sin. They rebel against God. That's how they sin. So they mass-produced. They give birth to future generations of people. They mass-produced the infected code. This is reproduction. The software designer, which is God, okay, is not happy with the new version and decides to do a mass recall. That's the flood, the great flood. And only the purest copy of the code that he could find was left on earth, which is Noah and his family. 8 people all together in the ark. They were not destroyed by the flood. Only 8 people were saved. Eventually, the users end up infecting the code again. The software designer decides that an upgrade is due, and that upgrade is Jesus. So God sent Jesus to us. Those who don't accept the upgrade decide it is the original designer's fault, God's fault, that the software is infected and they lose all faith, all trust in Him. The designer decides to scrap the whole project. So that's why in the Bible, the last book, Revelation, talks about the end of the world. That is, and God will re-release the upgraded copies in a controlled environment, which is heaven, and burn the rest. So the conclusion is, take the upgrade. Thank you.
Our last speaker for tonight, Brother Shah Kirit. President.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Almighty God, most gracious, most merciful. To Dr. Fairuz, Mr. Oliver Wong, Mr. Willie Poh, brothers and sisters, I greet you with the Islamic greeting. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May peace, blessings of Almighty God be with you all. Okay, the subject tonight is creation or evolution. And I'll give you from a Muslim's perspective. Okay. Earlier we have heard how Willie Poh has presented from the evolution, so I'm not going to the detailed belief of evolution. But as a Muslim, I would like to be an objective person, a rational person, a logical person. And I would like to accept whatever that is the truth, wherever it comes from. Now when we speak about evolution, the way evolution is presented to us, there are several questions we need to ask. Question number 1 is, how did the first life begin? Because there must be an evolution, it's part of evolution. How did the first life begin? Then the second question is, what is the process that this evolution took place? What is the mechanism? And the third question is, where are the fossils of the intermediary species? And if you say there's a one common ancestor until you get other species that you have today, then where are the intermediary species? Well, the first question that we have, how did the first life come into being? How did the first cell come into being? If it is the nature that conditioned the cell into coming into being, you need to have an explanation to it. And for life, protein molecules are essential, right? Okay, let's speak of a protein molecule. Now, it is essential in order to develop, to create a protein molecule in a very tight condition in the lab. You need about 100 different protein enzymes to create one protein molecule. And you also need the DNA to exist then. Now the question is, you need 100 different protein enzymes just to create one protein molecule. Okay, hold on. How did the first protein molecule
in the whole universe come into being. Because you need protein in order to create protein. You can't have protein without protein. You may have some suggestion. Maybe you see this is how this amino acid come into being. Okay, even if you can have amino acid, you're not sure how it formed actually. You're not really sure. Even if you can have amino acid, but there are other conditions to be fulfilled. For example, that all the amino acids in the protein chain are of the right type in the right sequence. That all the amino acids in the chain are left-handed. That all these amino acids are united between them by forming a chemical bond, the peptide bond. All this must happen. Did nature condition all this simultaneously? And today, by science, we also know DNA should also be present. Was also DNA present then? If you speak about the DNA molecule, it contains about 100 million pages of encyclopedia information. How did the DNA come into being? If it is a divine order, no problem. But if you say you leave it to the nature, to chance, the nature takes its course, how did nature do that? Now what does Fred Hoyle says? The chance that higher life form might have emerged in this way is comparable to chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the materials therein. This is Fred Hoyle, an evolutionist himself. Indeed, such a theory that life was assembled by an intelligence is so obvious that one wonders why it is not widely accepted as being self-evident. The reasons are psychological rather than scientific. Now, in the Quran, God says in Surah Rum chapter 30, verse number 27, it is He who originated creation and then regenerates it. And it is easy for God to do that. Question number 2. What are the mechanisms of this evolution? So the answer is given: natural selection and also mutation. Okay? Now, if you say about natural selection, you observe how this lion chases after deers, natural selection that happens, alright. But natural selection does not change one species to another species. It may make the deer run faster, but does not change the deer to another species. And when you observe the variation that was mentioned just now, this variation, the information is already inside the gene information. It is already present. The different combinations that are available, it is already there. It does not add any new information to the gene information. Now, Stephen Jay Gould, what he says about this? The essence of Darwinism lies in a single phrase: natural selection is the creative force of evolutionary change. No one denies that selection will play a negative role in eliminating the unfit. But Darwinian theories require that it creates the fit as well. Now, Charles Darwin himself, I remember well the time when the top of the eye made me cold all over. How a nerve comes to be sensitive to light hardly concerns us more than how life itself first originated. Now this is what Charles Darwin says. To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. This by Charles Darwin himself. Now, if you say it's mutation that is the process of evolution, mutations, 99% are harmful, 1% are neutral. Neutral does not mean it brings any positive changes. Neutral means no changes at all. So if you see the direct effect of mutation is harmful, and mutations add no new information to an organism's DNA. But if you look into what the effect we have through mutation, it does not bring any improvement. A baby that is affected by mutation does not turn into heroes, X-Men, Spider-Man, Superman, or Cicak-Man. But it's a pitiful. I mean, if you see these pictures, it is so saddening. These are the harmful effects of mutation. Now, B.G. Ranganathan, what does he say? First, genuine mutations are very rare in nature. Secondly, most mutations are harmful since they are random rather than orderly changes in the structure of genes. Any random change in a highly ordered system will be for the worse, not for the better. Suppose if there is a building, a very well structured building, and there's an earthquake to shake the building will not improve in any way. It will only bring destruction to the building. Now, Pierre Pigras, he says, the opportune appearance of mutation permitting animals and plants to meet their needs seem hard to believe. Yet the Darwinian theory is even more demanding. A single plant, a single animal will require thousands and thousands of lucky appropriate events. Thus, miracle would become the rule. Events with an infinitesimal probability could not fail to occur. Mutation, a random change, is not likely to improve the genome in any more than blindly firing a gunshot through the hood of a car is likely to improve engine performance. And those I quote are actually evolutionists themselves. Question number 3, are there any fossil evidence of evolution, the intermediary species? Today we have more than 350 million fossils in our record. 350 million. But if you look into them, okay, let me see what happened. Evolution or creation? Charles Darwin. Why, if species have descended from other species by insensibly fine gradations, do we not everywhere see innumerable transitional forms? Why is not all nature in confusion instead of the species being, as we see them, well defined? But as by this theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed. But in our record today, we don't find them. We don't. Nice, he says, the record jumps, and all the evidence show that the record is real. The gaps we see reflect real events in life history, not the artifact of a poor fossil record. Stephen Jay Gould, the history of most fossil species include 2 features. It must be stasis and sudden appearance. But there's no room for intermediary species. Mark, he says, a major problem in proving the theory has been the fossil record. This record has never revealed traces of Darwin's hypothetical intermediate variants. Instead, species appear and disappear abruptly. Species come into being suddenly and they disappear suddenly, not through a process of evolution. The Cambrian age, which is about 550 million, 600 million years ago. And if you notice, in this Cambrian age, there were about 50 phyla, 50 different phyla at that time, and today, which is survived, is only about 35. In other words, if I show you a diagram, if you believe in evolution, it must be from a single life, evolved to many different species. But with the record that we have during the Cambrian age, there were 50 different phyla, and today there are 35, from more becoming less. And during the Cambrian age, which is 550, 600 million years ago, you will find these species were just there without any evolutionary traces. Okay, all phyla appeared of a sudden, no ancestral form, stunning complexity. It was not like a simple, uncomplex cell becoming evolution, becoming more and more complex. No. Richard Dawkins, the Cambrian strata of rocks, vintage about 600 million years, are the oldest ones in which we find most of the major invertebrate groups. It is as though they were just planted there without any evolutionary history. Charles Darwin, if numerous species belonging to the same genera or families have really started into life all at once, the fact would be fatal to the theory. Stephen Jay Gould, the fossil record had caused Darwin more grief than joy. The Quran says in Al-Baqarah chapter 2 verse 117, the originator of the heaven and earth, when he decides on something, he just says be and it is. Kun fayakun. When God says be and it is not necessarily God said elephant, cook, elephant pops out. God said giraffe, cook, giraffe pops out. We do not know. Whatever way God wants it to happen, God will do it. And today, when we study science, we need to be objective in what are the results that we get. We need to be objective. And whatever way God chooses, as a person who submits to God, I have no problem. Now, there are many fossils that you find that is the same species also available today without any evolution examples. Okay, this is about 140 million years old, coelacanth. Okay, they thought that was an intermediary species before, but later they found 200 coelacanths in the sea, and exactly the form is exactly the same as 140 million years ago. Okay, Tiktaalik, which is also the crocodile today. Okay, how did the first flying creature come into being? If you say evolution, how did it know it has to grow wings in order to fly? Because evolution takes millions of years, isn't it so? How do you know you need to have a wing to fly? Because if your wings are a few inches shorter or few inches longer, you cannot fly. Now, they try to put in during the time of dinosaurs, this dinosaur chasing over a fly, and while chasing the fly, then the arm grows into wing, and wow, the dinosaur can fly. But the question is, why does the dinosaur have to chase after a fly? And the second most important point is, there's already a fly which is flying. The resemblance of, okay, I'll just go forward and forward. How did bears, okay, how did, what do you call these, whales come into being? Whales are mammals, they're not fish. Bear jump into the water, finally bear becomes whale. That is the explanation they give you. What about giraffe? The deer eating the grass and the leaf when the lower range is out of reach, then they have to stretch the neck, and they become giraffe. Millions of years, grass would have grown then. Then why don't we have elephant, giraffe, cow, giraffe, for example? I'm sorry, I just have to, there are so many evidences from the fossils. Okay, I just have to skip this. There are many propositions that are given, okay, this is the missing link, this is our ancestor, etc. But then they have all been cancelled. Okay? Now, argument for creation. General theory of relativity by Einstein, special theory of relativity, a study of photons and electromagnetic radiation, intelligent design, actually point the finger into creation. There is a supreme being, an intelligent being, that created the whole universe that we have today. For example, I'll just go very quickly into the general theory of relativity. Einstein is the first one who discovered our universe is expanding. When you say the universe is expanding by time, necessary logical implication will bring, if you go back into the past, the universe would be shrinking. If you go far back into time, the universe will shrink into a point of singularity. And this is physics, astrophysics. Our whole universe, when you say about Big Bang, it started from a point of singularity. At the point of singularity, there's no time, no space, no matter. I repeat, time does not exist. There's no empty space. There's no matter. Out of nothing, the whole universe comes into being. And scientists today estimate there are 10,000 billion stars. And all this whole creation that we have, and this is only the bubble in the whole universe, this is observable universe, 10,000 billion stars come into being from a point of singularity. No time, no space, no matter. If you say nature takes cause, there is no, not even emptiness, not even empty space, no time, no space, no matter. There's no nature. How nature takes its course if there's no nature in the first place? Who can create something from nothing? You think about it. Now, special theory of relativity, a study of photons and electromagnetic radiation, gives a proof to us today that photons do not exist in our physical realm, but photons exist in another realm. Okay? As a Muslim, we have no problem. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise is to God, the Lord of the world, in plural. We have so many words. As a Muslim, I have no problem with this. But photons do not exist in our physical realm. And when you study photon, it's very beautiful. At the speed of light, time becomes zero, which is about 186,000 miles per second or 300,000 kilometers per second. Time becomes zero. And when you study the characteristics of photons, the believing in God becomes very natural. Just time does not allow me to go into details now. Now, intelligent design, if you look around you, everything is by design. Sometimes one galaxy passes through another galaxy without any major collisions. And in one galaxy, it contains about 100 billion stars, with its planets, the moons, and so on. So one galaxy to another galaxy, I mean everything is in perfect order. You look into the universe, you look into the cell, the biggest of the creation, the smallest of the creation, you look into the cell. Our cell, one cell is also so complex with so many organs in it. Like a huge city, for example. Now, philosophical argument, anything that begins must have a cause. Agree? Do you agree? Anything that has a beginning must have a cause. Now, the universe comes from a point of singularity. There's a beginning for the universe. So there must be a cause to this universe. Now, what is the characteristic of this cause? The cause must only be one. It cannot be more than one. The cause itself must only be one. And secondly, the cause itself must be uncaused. Otherwise, the question will be, who created the cause? And who created the cause's cause? And who created the cause, and it will go on and on and on, and we will never arrive. Okay? So the cause himself must be uncaused. There's no beginning for it. And the cause must be immaterial. The cause itself cannot be material, because material begin to exist. Now, this is the concept of God that Islam offers. In Surah Al-Ikhlas chapter 112 verse 1 to 4. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. The first condition, Qul huwallahu ahad. Say God is one and only. God is not two, God is not three, God is not many. If there's more than one God, there will be confusion, there will be fighting one another, power sharing, etc. Allahus Samad. God is eternal, God is absolute. God has no beginning, no ending. God requires no sustenance, but He is the provider of sustenance. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. God begets not, nor is He begotten. God have no children, no parents. God have no son, no daughter, no mother, no father. And the fourth verse is, Walam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. There is nothing like unto God. Whatever you can see in this universe, whatever, even you shut your eyes, whatever mental picture comes to your mind cannot be God. Because what you can see, what you can imagine are creation. God is the creator. So Islam teaches us, worship the creator, not worship his creation. That's what Islam teaches us. That's the word you have been waiting for, right? The end. Okay, thank you very much.